A day in the life of a teacher. They're all different, but teachers don't, not all of them. Some don't have a life just like anybody else in any profession. Some do different things, but different things every day as well, each individual teacher. But a day in the life, at least this one. I get up every morning and exercise, get outdoors in nature, and I love it. So, some people talk about not being able to see the forest for the trees. So, getting out in nature helps us do that. So, when I'm out, I'm seeing the forest and the trees and putting human life in context of the world, the big picture, the ecology we live in. Help keep me connected so I can learn more and help keep students connected. This morning, I wanted to do a little more exercise. Went to some different parks in the area I live in, and it was awesome. I saw a red-shouldered hawk way up in a tree, dead part, crawling out, calling out. Got some good video. Looked at our local creek after we had some rain, made some nice video. Maybe I'll have to put a little bit in here if I can, like, go into iMovie. Maybe I can, like, sew some of that in. Went to another park, saw some animal tracks. Awesome. Saw some white-tailed deer, a bunch here and there. Saw some tracks of some idiots, you know, think the world revolves around them, throw beer cans, crap like that, tear stuff up. Um, Even though these are not trails that they should be having their four-wheelers on, it's for walkers, hikers, bikers. Some people with four-wheelers are fine, but, some people are total jerks, think they can tear it up. No one else matters. They can destroy horse trails. They have no business being out there. Total idiots. They should have someone get a four-wheeler and tear up their yard or ride a four-wheeler through their bedroom and see how they like it. But picked up after some of them idiots. Again, not the good ones who maybe do a four-wheeler and are nice and take care of the world and are out there to enjoy it or something. There's different ways to use it, of course. But yeah, I saw some white-tailed deer and some cottontail rabbit. Beautiful cottontail rabbit tracks. And some beaver tracks. Ooh, saw some beaver chew on a tree. Saw some nice beaver tracks. So maybe some river otter. That was awesome. I got to check with some experts. I think it's river otter. I need to check. I don't see enough to have that one down well. but I know I saw a beaver and maybe a river otter. So awesome. So got out, went to different parks, saw some stuff like that. Didn't get as much exercise. Wanted to do some good lifting, do some pull-ups on this tree I got. Do like 5 sets of 12 or 17 pull-ups and some other stuff. But that's what some of us do. Exercise. Got a railroad tie I like to do squats with, one-legged squats. But that's what some of us do. Then got to do stuff in the day. So have to listen to things, or I want to. Just part of being curious, interested in life, developing one's fullest, looking more at the big picture, knowing the forest and the trees, listening to something about the OODA loop, George Boyd's OODA loop. What is it? Observe, orient, decide, act. That's what we do when we're doing a lot of things. Observe something in the world, orient, put it in context of everything we know, try to bring into play as quickly as possible, depending on the situation. Sometimes you got more time for this than others. You know, like Boyd was a fighter pilot. In a fighter pilot situation, it takes more practice ahead of time to be able to do this, bring stuff into play, other stuff you know. Or like when Bruce Lee's doing his work, that would happen fast, don't have a lot of time. But in some situations, you got more time. Like for a lawyer, observe and orient can take more time. Make a decision, act, and then see how that changes things. Observe, reorient, make a new decision, act. Well, like if some Boyd is a fighter pilot, someone else is doing this too. So his observe and orient has to take into account the other person's OODA loop, and he's got to react to that. But that was good. As I said in the podcast, a lot of people in teaching self-defense focus too much on this. When he says people who know better, they're focusing more on this, on the orient and making decisions before you act in some self-defense situation. In some self-defense courses, people think it's kind of super cool to do this, makes you feel good, but here's more important, this stuff here. Like, for example, don't take something and go to a bar and get into a fight and think you're cool. You know, just avoid things in the first place. Make good decisions. But that's an interesting thing that is good for us to know about how we interact with the world and what's going on. Gives us some grasp of the situation, helps us see what we're doing in general and what we need to do, and then we can dig into detail. Just like in SAT stuff. You know, a lot of the SAT readings have an intro, a body, maybe a conclusion. But it's good to know that because people are doing an SAT or ACT reading. They're traumatized. They're being timed. They're stressed out. They're anxious. They got anxiety because sometimes they're too focused on the fact that they're being judged for college on this and they have to do well. And nonsense like that. And the test might not measure what it's supposed to. So SAT people to know they have to do an intro. Hey, this is what we're going to talk about. You're stressed. Focus on this. And then they talk about it. Then you answer the questions. And that helps a little bit. We got to know that. Kind of like orienting yourself. But you got to know the detail for a particular reading to be able to answer the questions. Like, does it talk about a topic and then a problem and then experimental apparatus and then an experiment and then conclusions, as some of them do in the science section on the SAT? We need more detailed stuff like that and see exactly what they're doing. But it's important for, thinking about what you're doing in law and being a fighter pilot, fighting, things like that, different situations, looking at a situation in general. So there's one thing I listened to today. Interesting. Then some of us actually read logic books so we know how to teach better. But unlike the nonsense that the anti-intellectual, what was it? I forgot, some doofus said, those who can't do, teach. As opposed to, I think Aristotle, it's a quote, he said, those who can do, those who know, do, those who understand, teach. Which isn't the case all the time, as you can tell, because like some teachers, like anybody else, are not very smart, just like in any other profession. But that's what it takes to really be a good teacher. If you don't understand, you have no business being in there. It's got to be beyond merely knowing something, which you can do to do a certain career. And the better, the more you understand something, the better you can do the career. But to really be able to teach and to convey something to someone else well, to explain, you have to have understanding, relationships developed. So a good teacher is going to dig into things like that as well. Techniques, methods. So that's what some of us are actually out there doing. Learning to be better teachers, to help our students be better. It's part of being part of the day in the life for some of us. Doing that thing that Aristotle says, working on understanding. Understanding being knowing the essence of something, being able to trace the idea, our grasp of the idea, step by step back to the evidence of the senses. It doesn't have to be every single step, like every single teeny tiny little step, but at least the basic ideas, and then you can fill in through the years more and more as you just talk to other people who know what they're doing. So for example, quantum mechanics doesn't come from nowhere. What does it depend on? Calculus doesn't come from nowhere. For example, it's an easy one. For that, you got to know some pre-calc, some geometry, some algebra, your numbers, counting. We got to be able to trace it back, or some rhetorical device. In literature, you get some rhetorical device. You have to understand some reading and writing. You got to understand some thinking. You got to know your basic words, things like that. Like you learn your first words. Kind of a first easy little skeleton that you can kind of get for that. Adverb, verb, where does it come from? Why? So what is it? Where does it come from? Traced it back to the evidence of the senses, because as Galileo said, all human reasoning, to quote Aristotle, all human reasoning must be placed second to direct experience. Ideas come from experience. That's like the starting point. Just like in proofs, we have premises, we reason from there. All reasoning comes from the evidence of the senses, so we should be able to trace it back to that point. That's the starting point. Some people are just lost in words, lost in math. They don't know what they're talking about, running circles in their head because they never trace something back to the evidence of the senses. Okay, know what the essence of something is, be able to trace it back to the evidence of the senses, and understanding means relating something to other things we know, things that are causally relevant, like a lynx to a bobcat, to a cat, to ecology, to rodent populations, to human health, to controlling mice, which means controlling disease, controlling the spread of mice and rats and squirrels and fleas and stuff like that. Same thing with owls and coyotes and snakes are very important for controlling the population. Understanding them means knowing things like that and how they help make our world better. So we need to, some of us are actually studying logic and things like that. So there are some things we do in the day of a life of a teacher. Get out, exercise, be real. Instead of just talking the talk, we should walk the walk and be out seeing the forest and the trees and studying them on our own. Get surrounded by life, get exercise, get sunshine, maintain your health, learn something you're clueless about so you remember what it's like to be a student. It's something I like to do, learn new things, and that's part of the day in the life, so I don't lose track of what's going on with students. It's one thing some teachers do. So it's actually some effect too. Forgot what it's called. It's a known effect. But some, like, it's like the curse of the expert, something like that, as it might be called. Some people know something so well, they think everybody knows it, and they forget the work they had to do and where it came from. That's a major fail. Then they start doing silly things about epistemology and logic, and they get all bent out of shape because someone didn't know something right away, and they forgot all the work they need to go into it. So what they need to do is get their head out of somewhere and go into the world and learn something they don't know, so they remember what it's like to learn, and they know that they do not know everything, and they make mistakes, and they got to learn things too. Every human is like that. We all have to start from scratch and build up in certain areas. Then they'd be better off. But that's one thing I like to do. Get out, do things I cannot do very well, so I maintain my contact with being a student. So there's some things in the day of a life. Peace.